and have really loved being able to like connect with people, kind of unlock what planner peace means for people, and just encourage people to do what it is that works for them. And I think it's one of the most empowering things that anybody could do.
Hey, I'm Becca with the Happy Ever Crafter, and in this week's interview, I'm talking to Jessica Chung of Pretty Prints and Paper, and she is walking us through bullet journaling for beginners without the overwhelm. So if you've ever looked into bullet journaling, but you've thought, this is way more work than it would actually be helpful for me, and it's going to take me longer to set up my journal than it would to actually use it for a to-do list or as a planner, you need to keep watching, because in this video, we dispel that myth. We teach you how it can actually be used for your benefit as opposed to just taking time away from your day, and really reduce all the overwhelm. I also show you inside my bullet journal, and I'm not a professional bullet journaler, so I think it's actually just really fun to see someone else who's sort of a beginner at it and how I went through that process. So let's jump right in. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm like genuinely so excited to talk about this, because I feel like I probably didn't say this to you, and I don't think I've ever said it on the show before, but I'm one of those people who, like, when I learn about something that excites me, I go like all in hard for certain periods of my life, and then I'll just kind of like let it fall by the wayside. But like when I want to learn about something, I like go deep and learn everything about it. And that happened to me with bullet journaling earlier this year. And I haven't really expressed to anybody how excited I got about bullet journaling. And so I'm just really excited to talk about it. And we'll get into my story with it, because I'm not as obsessed with bullet journaling as I was like 6 months ago at this point.
Take a breath.
yeah, got obsessed, right, took a breath, like you said. But before we do that, I want to obviously let people know who you are. So who are you? What do you do? Where you live? All that kind of fun stuff.
My social security number. My name is Jessica Chung, and I have been a bullet journaler for maybe the last 4.5 years, since 2015. And before then, I just lost touch with my creativity and my artistic path, and got caught up in school and work and stuff. And so getting back to it in 2015, both in calligraphy and in bullet journaling, was a breath of fresh air back into the things that I used to love doing when I was a kid. And so I've been blogging about it, less so lately, but I blogged about it, Instagrammed my kind of journey with it for the last 4.5 years, and have really loved being able to like connect with people, kind of unlock what planner peace means for people, and just encourage people to do what it is that works for them. And I think it's one of the most empowering things that anybody could do. Oh, I live in Minneapolis.
I love that saying planner piece that you said. I've never heard that before. But okay, so you don't do this full time. Like what are you doing full time? And what are you tracking in your bullet journal that is like your day to day?
Great question. What I get paid to do during the day, I work for the University of Minnesota, excuse me, and I work for a department called the Leadership Minor. So I write curriculum, I teach, I do marketing and help make that program run. And so my bullet journal is full of marketing projects. Teaching is a huge part of what I care about and do each day. And just all the things that make that work. I'm in a band. I'm tracking like my attempts at working out. So there's some things in there.
Nice. Well, yeah, I'm excited to see your lesson, because obviously you just said that you do teaching, and I'm aware that you are a great teacher. So I'm excited to see that. But a couple things before we dive in. I mean, we can go back into my experience with bullet journaling, but I think that, and actually I was talking to somebody about this last night. So we were talking about like time management and productivity and all of that good stuff. And I said something about, I was like, have you ever heard of bullet journaling? Like you're talking about writing in your planner and all that stuff. Have you ever heard of bullet journaling if you're looking for like time management tool? And she goes, yeah, but like you're a calligrapher, you're a hand letterer, so that's easy for you. But I could never do bullet journaling. And I think that that's like a huge holdback for a lot of people. And a lot of the people watching this are calligraphers, hand letters, so they don't have that problem. But I think that a lot of people just assume because of Pinterest and what you see and like beautiful pictures of these really elaborate spreads and stuff that they could never do bullet journaling, or that it would end up being more of a time suck than a productivity tool. So can you talk a little bit about that before we get into your lesson? Because I think that's like a really important start.
Yes. And I react this way because that's what so many people have told me. And it makes me so sad because I think that's kind of an imagined barrier, because let's be honest, what I like to talk about is where the bullet journal system came from, and a dude created it. Like, it's not going to be like a super fancy, elaborate thing unless that's what you want to do. And so if you've never looked at the beginning origins of the bullet journal, I think that's what I'll be talking about, to give people a sense of like, wait, it can be really pared down. It can be really simple, because the whole purpose of it is to make your life easier. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. And for me, honestly, my handwriting is terrible. My lettering is very good. So I don't like to let the handwriting part get in the way of starting to do something that might be the thing that sticks, you know?
Yeah, totally. And when I learned about bullet journaling was through Instagram and Pinterest, which I think is where most people in our sphere are finding out about it, because you see all these, like I said, these really elaborate spreads. And I was overwhelmed by it myself, because I was like, oh my God, that's going to take so much time. But when it changed for me was when I actually got Ryder Carroll's book. I just like picked it up at the bookstore one day and I was like, you know what, I'm going to read this and find out about it. And I didn't realize how like broken down the system was, and how the whole goal of it is for productivity and to make things actually a lot easier. So I think a really good place to start, and I'm sure you would agree for anybody watching this, is to actually read that book before you jump into like Pinterest and looking at people's really crazy spreads. You should actually try and figure out the mechanics of it before. And I know you'll talk about that in your lesson too.
Yeah. And I think too, what Ryder's book, I mean, first of all, it's awesome because when you get to build the pages one by one, you get to decide what goes into it, how it's structured, and how it works with your mind, because that's why half the planners that I used didn't work for me, because it just didn't capture the way my brain wants to think.
Yeah, and I'm sure that people watching this can completely relate to that, because I feel like, and me for sure, had this issue before. You know, you'd buy a planner for a year. It's a year-long, whatever, calendar, 2019 calendar, and then, or planner. And then like 6 months in, you're like, I'm like sort of over this one. And you buy another one. And then you end up with this stack of different planners that all work in different ways. And you never really find one that's perfect for you. And I'm sure you'll touch on this too, but like the bullet journal, I had honestly, and like, I will like preach this. I had serious planner ADD before, and now I have one that fits everything. It's got notes for like upcoming things I'm working on that are just kind of all over the place, like just brain dumps. It's got like really nicely laid out calendar of the year, calendar of the month, calendar of the week, and I can see it all in one place, and it's so helpful. And I'm not also wasting like 50 planners that are half empty and having to store them in this tiny little office that I have.
Yes, it's such an expensive chunk of paper that you have just, I mean, I still do it. Like I have this whole shelf next to me of notebooks that I've picked up and want to try, or planners that I've had. I've tried them all. Ring bound, disc bound. Yes, we all have a shelf that looks like that, don't we? Oh my gosh. That's what I tell people. I'm like, we all know you have a pretty planner sitting somewhere. There's like one page written in it.
Yeah.
That up.
Yeah. And the other part, like, so I am all about using a bullet journal now. I don't use it perfectly in the bullet journaling way. And I think that after you do your lesson, I'm going to actually flip my camera onto my hands and show what mine looks like and some things that I've learned, because I am super beginner at it. But I think another piece that's really helpful and that will be encouraging to people, specifically the audience watching this, is that it's not only like a great way to have a planner, but it's also a great way to push yourself with your art and your lettering if you want to. Like I practice doodling my florals in there. I practice different styles of lettering in there, because it's a place that you can just kind of dump things and like at the same time make it look pretty and use it as practice for your art. So it's like all encompassing, such a perfect tool, especially for this audience watching it. I'm so excited for them to see your lesson.
Oh, that's amazing. And the florals, oh my gosh, that's making me think like I could expand some of what I'm doing in my bullet journal to include more art. Like that's a great idea instead of having it somewhere else.
So anyway, I'll show that later, but I think we should jump into your lesson because we're talking a lot about what bullet journaling is and we haven't actually talked about what bullet journaling is. So I'll take my face off here. We'll do that. And then I'll come back and we can look at mine too.
Okay, awesome.
So, what is bullet journaling and how do you get started? And I promise you, I'm going to tell you the no frills version because the spirit of this is that you get to do whatever works for you. Because when it got started, Ryder Carroll was the person who realized that pre-structured planners didn't really work for him, and he wanted a system that melded to his brain and how he wanted to plan his life and what made sense to his mind. And out came the bullet journal. And ever since he shared it, it has been wildly popular because it allows each and every one of us to create a system that is definitely customized not only to our lives, but also to how we see our time and how we like to be visual or creative in whatever sense that means for you. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what that has meant for me over the last 4.5 years and how you can get started too and take a little bit of the fear out of it. So I'm going to start with, this is how I tell people about the system. I'll tell you about the basics and what Ryder has created as part of the system. And I will tell you, now that you learn the rules, how to break the rules for your own mind. The first thing you need to know, honestly, it doesn't require a specific kind of notebook. Everyone thinks that it's called bullet journaling, and so you need a special kind of bullet like dot grid notebook, and you just don't. You can choose any of the ones that you have sitting on your shelf right now that are half started or kind of cute because you thought they were on sale, and use that. And a pen, anything that you have around. I know you have a pen. So you start off by taking whatever notebook you have, dot, lined, grid, whatever, and you number the pages at the bottom. And sometimes notebooks now have the page numbers at the bottom, which makes that a little bit easier because this is an unfolding type of planning. So as your pages get created over time, you need to log them somewhere in like an index. And you add the pages as you create them here so you can find it later. Plot twist, I used an index for probably 5 minutes and then I ditched it. So this is one of those things where as you pay attention to this video, figure out if this is something that really jives with you or it doesn't, and pay attention to that because then you kind of know what to keep and what to leave. So for me, index was just never something I really needed in my planner, so I ditched it. But the whole point of the system is to go from big to small and to have everything in one place. And so the first thing that Ryder does in his system is to have a future log. And it's as easy as drawing these 2 lines and writing in the names of the months, and that's it. The whole purpose being that you have a place to track stuff that is coming up, whether that's future tasks, future dates of birthdays, events. You have a place to put that. I use a Google Calendar. So I have never actually used the future log for how Ryder uses the future log, and that's okay. If you're a digital native like me, know that you don't have to be 0 to 100, right? So using a future log is optional, and again, take it or leave it. I added in these visual calendars because I'm a visual person, and he didn't even do that. So again, this is one of those things, keep it simple. Or what I know about myself is that I like to see time vertically. So this might be a way that you adapt the future log to work with your brain and tracking things up and down instead of left to right. We're going to zoom in a little bit more from those big 6 months to the month in front of us. So in this case, I put February. And how Ryder does it in the bullet journal system is that he has the dates listed on the side all the way down. And then what he'll do is track, these are the events going on that day. This is one way to do that. On the other side, it's tasks. So at some point in this month, I have to take care of X, Y, and Z, finish up this kind of project at some point in this month. This is a nice process to sit down and take stock of what's coming up. This is as you build these things, it's so nice for me to sit down and really see what is upcoming, what are the projects I have to put my energy toward, and what are my priorities, and drawing them out this way is really, really beneficial. Now, this list has never worked for me, so I don't use it, and I know there are other people who do love it, and so they use this. Sometimes people skip a line and they have 2 lines per day, and they organize their time this way. That's never been for me, so I go by the more traditional grid calendar, and that's okay too. But there's many variations on this monthly page because depending on who you are and what is going on in your life, this can be as big or as little as you need, whether that is like my home projects this month or my work projects this month or things that the kids have coming up this month. So this monthly layout should be designed to suit what you need to keep track of. So we'll zoom in a little bit more, and this is where it gets kind of fun. In Ryder's original system, he didn't have a weekly, and he goes right to the dailies. The whole point of the bullet journal system is just to get down onto paper as quickly as you can, the stuff from your head to paper. And then you don't have to hold on to it anymore, and you just use up as much or as little space as you need. I know when I spent money on an Erin Condren planner, I felt such guilt for going away from it for a whole entire month, and then you can't use the pages anymore. So for me, that's like such a waste of time and money on some really expensive paper at that point. And so for the bullet journal, you can step away from it for a week, come back, and it will not judge you. There it is. You just turn the page and start again. So you simply write the date up at the top, and then you just rapid log the tasks that you have for the day. And I want to take note of some of the things that Ryder talks about in a thing called a key. These are the symbols that he uses to keep track of what he writes down and does it quickly so that he can quickly read it, make sense of it, and move on. For him, a dot is a task, a circle is an event. He used to have triangles for appointments, a dash for notes. If something got canceled, he crossed it out, which I know for some of you is really stressful. And then we'll talk about migration in a little bit. Here is another way that you need to customize it for your own self and what makes sense to you. For me, a dot was never going to be about tasks for me. Dot means something else entirely. So I don't want to fight my brain. I just want to go with it. And so I use a checkbox like many of you do. There's some satisfaction in just filling up that entire box with color. And then I just combined these 2 events to a circle. I still use a dash for notes. But here's where I really wanted to pull in things that really mattered to me, and that's where this heart icon came from. For me, I wanted to keep track of not just the things I have to do or the things I did, but the things that really make life special to me. And so the heart is for when someone says something funny or something great happened and I want to keep track of it, because I believe that those are the moments that are just as important as the tasks that I accomplish. So as I work that out in therapy, I'm also trying to live that by incorporating it into my bullet journal as well. Other things that are me specific, I work on a team and there's a lot of delegation that happens in my team, and there are tasks that I need to keep track of, but I don't need to do. So I create this double arrow to know that this task is being accounted for somewhere else and someone else is in charge of it, and then I can look back and see how I need to follow up on it. This is like a sand timer. I got this idea from Kim at Tiny Ray of Sunshine, and it's basically a waiting for icon. So here I am waiting for a package or waiting for an email reply so that I can just know that that's on my radar, or I forget that I got stickers coming. And then I have a check mark. Sometimes things just come up, especially if you have, you take care of other living things like children or animals. You know that some things just emerge and you have to take care of it. And so when I want to get credit for that, I just add a check mark and just add what it is that I did do. Because sometimes I got to the end of the day and I looked back and I was like, I didn't do today. And then I realized, yes, I did. I managed all these other fires that came up. So adding that check mark, it's just fun for me to see how much of my life was intentional with the task and how much of it happened with the check mark. So that's me personally. What icons would make sense for you? Is there something that you want to do for your own gratitude or your own kids or whatever that you want to add into your key? Think about that. So that comes in handy when you do that day-to-day daily log. At the end of the day, after you use up maybe this much or this much room, you just start again with another date and fill in more stuff. This is an opportunity to reflect and look back and be like, do I still need to do this task? I didn't get to it. Do I still need to make a dentist appointment? Plot twist, yes, you do. Don't skip out on it like I did and then be miserable 3 years later when they're chiseling it from my teeth. Okay. So what you do is you add a little carrot here to show that you're going to migrate that task from one day to another. You don't have to do that all the time because obviously if I see an open box on the page, I can take care of that. But that is what migration is. It's like an opportunity for you to decide, is this still important? Do I still have to do this? Is it relevant? And if not, you can let that go. Otherwise, you can copy it over or just keep the box open and know that you still need to take care of it, right? So this is just, again, to download the stuff out of your head onto paper. And then the other part that makes up the system are the collections. This is basically any list you've ever wanted to make. All you need to do is turn the page and make the list. And this is as simple as it can be, right? We don't have to make it as complicated as all like the sketches you've seen, like books to read and you sketch a bookcase. It does not have to look that way. It can be as simple as this, because if that serves your purpose, that's what you should do. And that's where it gets really tempting to follow all the Pinterest and Instagram layouts out there. And frankly, that's not what all bullet journals look like. So I like to show a pared down version for you to see what I mean. And this can be things that you want, like a big project you have to tackle, things you want to track, list of things that you want to get to, like they're aspirational, like a bucket list or 20 before 2020, lists like that. They can also be like, the last time that I did this, or my mood or symptoms or things I want to talk to my therapist about. Any list you could ever dream of, you just turn the page and you make it. Note if the idea of your lists mingling with your to-do list sounds like that would drive you nuts, and that is a sign that you might want to look for a different kind of structure. I'm okay with things intermingling like this, but once upon a time I did like that separation. And so for you might like something like a traveler's notebook, which is essentially a cover that holds a notebook inside. And all you'll have to do is slide it in and out of the elastic. And these are cool because you can, use one for all your tasks and your calendaring, and then you can keep your lists in another book. So you can have that separation, but it's all in one place. That might work better for you. Take note about what you need, right? There's no real wrong way to do this. And that's it, my friends. Honestly, then you just turn the page and keep going, and you fill it out and create the structures that work for you over time. Whenever people get started on this, I try to encourage people that they will experiment a lot and they will fail a lot. And it's, instead of feeling like, oh, I hate this and regretting it and wanting to tear out your pages, I want you to think about what you're learning from that layout that didn't work or that medium that didn't quite pan out, right? It's such a learning experience. And when I first started, you can see in 2015 how quickly these things changed for me, right? Like I used it for 5 seconds and then I never picked that back up again. But how quickly over time I tried, this layout and then this layout, and this list looked like shit. And I tried a T-chart for a little while with some washi tape. And for me at that time, it was important to try to track my water intake. And then I was planning some trips and I wanted to just try this layout, which I didn't keep after a while. And you start to learn and hone in on what style works for you. And this really quickly became the style that worked for me. This whole weekly thing was how I see time. Like, I don't see time just by day to day, but I need to see the arc of the entire week. And so the rest of the time that you'll see any of my bullet journals is like through the weekly. And I've stuck with that ever since 2015. And over time, it has evolved and changed, and I love the system now. So right now, the ways that I've taken a variation on that is I've figured out notebooks that I really love. I have gone through enough experimentations, enough bad notebooks for me to know, personally, I'm never going to use a moleskin. I love using watercolor, I love using inks, and I need a paper that can suit that. And so I have learned that I'm going to spend a little bit more money on quality paper. And I have picked up on some of my tendencies, right? Where I try to do some color. I love color, and that I want to do something easy for me. And so stenciling has become really a go-to so that I can just quickly take a stencil, take a brush, pat, 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 and have something beautiful. Some people love using stickers. Great. That's not me. That's awesome for them. And I don't feel tempted to do those things just because it really works for someone else. And that is the beauty of the system, is that over the years, I have tried some of those trendy things or some of the layouts that other people have done just to see if it'll work, and then quickly realize what does or what doesn't. And that's the cool thing. It's like trying on clothes and trying on outfits, is that you get to experiment, you see if you like it, you see if it works, and then you move on if it doesn't. And so for me, I love using a weekly. And I love using a weekly that is 5 days. I've learned that I see time in sets of work week and weekend. And I've whittled it down to, I just want to get a sense of what's happening. I use my Google Calendar for all the rest. And then I will brain dump down here. I started doing a Dutch door the last couple months so that I could see the week in full view and then still do daily lists. And then I can just turn the page and continue to see how Thursday has a lot more, my weekend has a lot more, and then Friday only has a couple. That's exactly the whole point, is that you use as much or as little. It's flexible. You can create anything you want. And some people are super anxious about that, where they see, blank pages and they're like, oh my God, what do I do? But that's the really exciting thing about this, is that honestly, you put some ideas down on paper, your first layout, you'll draw it out, it'll be meticulous, and then you will hate it, and then you will turn the page and try something else, and you get closer and closer to what really works. You see the blank page and everything is possible, which kind of freaks you out, but I promise that the more that you practice doing it, the more comfortable you are with creating the structures for yourself that other people, when other people gave me planners, that's the structure they think everyone could work in, and it's just not true. Everyone has their own way of thinking, everyone has their own style, and ways that time makes sense to them, and everybody has their own version of organization. It does not only look like perfect handwriting and meticulous lists. It can look more just like scribbles and sketches and things like that. So embracing what it is that makes you work is what exactly the bullet journal has been for me. And even if you don't bullet journal and you don't want to take the time to draw stuff out, you can always take the lessons from bullet journaling and then putting it into practice in a pre-planned planner. So you can always add stickers. You can always cover up a label that says notes and then actually make it a useful list, right? I never used that notes section of my planner. So maybe I could turn that into a grocery list, or make that into a people I have to reply to list, or sketching something else entirely. So being able to realize that the rules that you've been given are not really rules, and you actually have so much more freedom and flexibility than you ever realized. Once I got into that practice, I never went back. And it's silly for us to think that our lives would stay the same all season long, all year long, that the same structure of planner will serve your needs the whole entire time. And so maybe your planner needs to evolve too and have seasons just like we all do. So that's why I love the bullet journal, and I promise you, all you need to do to start is you grab a journal, you grab a pen, and try it out. And then you never know what'll unfold from there. But I tell you, you will never be ready, and you'll never have all the right stuff. You have literally everything you need to start today.
So I had like 500 things I wanted to say as we were working through your lesson, but I didn't want to interrupt. So like a couple of things I want to pick up from what you were talking about is, and we talked about this in the intro too, is how not overwhelming it can be, and how like it doesn't have to be this like beautiful magical thing. It's just the big ideas, all like start big and then move smaller. I think that's a really good way to think about it, because I remember when I had started bullet journaling, not understanding how like the month worked with the year, worked with the week, worked with the days, and like how to where to actually put all of the tasks and how to migrate them and all those things. So I think that was like a really good introduction for people.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's my whole goal, is to make it seem possible. And I think the first thing that people think of is they're overwhelmed with all of a sudden their own sense of possibility. And it's really exciting. So I hope that it's more inspiring than overwhelming, and that it gives people permission to just like jump in.
Yeah. And that's definitely a thing that I think, like, you see that blank spread of pages like you were talking about. And for some people that's paralyzing, and for some people that's like super inspiring. So like you said, hopefully that's an inspiring part and not a paralyzing part. But also, like, I want to reiterate how I really think people should read Ryder Carroll's book, because it really makes you feel not so scared to put pencil to paper. But I do want to talk about my experience with it a little bit, because I know that you've been doing this for a long time. And so for me, it's like really fresh, and I remember exactly how I felt when I got started. And so I read through Ryder Carroll's book, and I had to spend more time reading it than I normally, like a normal book, because I would be like looking at this page where he's explaining the monthly spread, and then I would keep reading and get to like the weekly spread and be like, okay, but how do those work together? And I'd have to flip through the book and try and understand it. And so I had kind of, as I was reading it, and maybe this is a tip for people who might grab his book and start this, is I got one of those journals that I had that was like half full and just a crappy old one. And as I was reading it, I like mocked up the pages in the order that I was trying to understand, like how he was doing it. They weren't pretty. They were like pencil, just like month, year, trying to map it out in my head so it would make sense. And then after I read the book, I kept that like scrap one. So for the first week of bullet journaling, I did it all in pencil, and I did it all in a journal that I knew I would never show anybody. And I was just trying to like work through it in my head. Because I think that as much as we say it shouldn't be overwhelming, and as much as we say that like you're doing it for you, you're not doing it for other people, I know my audience and I know myself, and they're going to want it to look perfect. And so like, I think don't be afraid to do it in a journal that like you'll never look at ever again.
Like a junk journal, or, you know, you need a couple bad pancakes to get to like making good ones.
I like that analogy, because every time I make pancakes, I screw up the first two.
First one
like
is terrible.
always. Okay. So I want to show my bullet journal. And I also want to keep people remembering that this is not like, this is probably like starting from week 3 that I started my bullet journal, because I did the first couple weeks in a crappy one that I will not show you. But let me flip my camera onto my hands, and I'll just kind of like talk through. So we won't be able to see your face, but we'll be able to hear your voice. So you can give commentary if you want.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay, one second. Okay, so this is the journal that I use, and it's moleskin, I think. No, it's look term. How the heck do you say that word?
Honestly, this is like the first test of all bullet journalists, is like, how do you say Loik term? So I get it.
Loik term. Is that what you said?
I think so.
Okay. Well, that's what this is. Oh, this exposure is driving me nuts. Okay. So that's what this journal is. And it's like the dot grid format one. And when I started, like, we'll just go from the beginning, and I'll talk through some points that I like remember. So I made a key, and that's kind of actually the first thing I want to say is like, I started it the way that a bullet journal should work, with the key and like all the different symbols and stuff. And you'll see how I stopped using those as we go. But like, I did some of the ones that were like standard, and then I added a couple like workout and deadline and stuff like that.
Ooh,
Just based on like,
deadline.
yeah, I like that one. Also question, because this would be stuff that like I'd be working through a project and I'd have a question for a friend or like one of my contractors that I knew I wanted to ask them later, and I'd put that in, which was really helpful. So like you said in yours, to just add things that make sense for you. And I loved your gratitude thing. I might incorporate that down the line. But yeah, that was my key at the beginning. And then my first, just as we go through this too, I want to mention that like, I wish I could show a time lapse of making this, because when I started it, it was all black and white. None of these colors were in here. This header wasn't here. I literally just had it like just the dates and a couple of the notes. And then as I worked through it, I realized like I wanted my workshops to stick out in my mind. So I made them yellow. I wanted like different things to pop out based on color. And so I like added things as I went. I still use this page, well, and like the whole annual one. But it's like, I'm fine with this getting messy, and like I cross things out, I add things, and I realize that next year when I do it, I'm going to need it to be a little bit bigger, because I've got things like in the margin and just kind of all over the place. But I definitely will keep incorporating this annual one. I find it super helpful. And then this was the first full month spread that I did. And I must have seen this on somebody else's bullet journal, like this layout. So I did the classic, like put the date down the side and then have one line for each day for like the big things. And then I always like having a to-do list in mind. So I just kind of like started it in the middle. And as I went through things for the month, I was just adding them as I needed to. And same thing with this page. I didn't have any of these doodles on it at the beginning. It was all plain black and white. And then I just like added them when I had time later on.
Do you like the list format?
Yeah. So like I've adapted it a little bit. You'll see as we go through that I've changed it. But I really like having like one big page like that, where I can see like kind of one or two main things per day on it. And then this is an example of like, I had left this page blank originally, and then one day I was on the plane and I had time, so I filled it out with florals. And one thing I really liked doing was the habit tracker. And this actually really did keep me on track for, I think this was March. Yeah, March habit tracker. I saw this layout in someone else's. It's like totally ripped off from someone else, and I wish I could say who, but and like now you guys know when I had my period in March. It's like great. But it's like really cool to look back on this at the end of the month and be like, oh wow, I am really good at full 8-hour sleeps, and I'm actually not that good at drinking water. So I really like this spread. And then this was my first like week long one, where I had set up the days. I know that technically in bullet journaling, you're supposed to just put like Monday and work through Monday. And then on Tuesday, you put Tuesday and work through Tuesday. I knew right off the bat that I wouldn't enjoy that. I need to be able to see my whole week right off the bat.
Totally.
Yeah. So I laid it all out first, and then I put in like the big things, but I was using the symbols at this point, and I was like migrating things as I needed to. And again, these florals weren't here. I added them later, but I realized quickly that I did not like this format with the symbols. I work in like an hourly format in my days. So I always want to see like based on like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., whatever, all the way down. And so as I worked through it, this is just another example of like crappy handwriting, totally fine to just have a brain dump every once in a while. I also do CrossFit, and I was tracking my workouts. And then same thing, this was blank, added some YouTube topics one day as I was brainstorming them. And then this was my next spread for a week. And so I knew that I wanted it in the hours of the day. So I had spread it out this way. And then at the bottom, I left room for random things that I knew like might happen that evening or whatever. But I like being able to see like how long things are going to take me in chunks like that. And although that's not like a standard bullet journaling thing, I don't even have any symbols on this. This is just like what works for me better in a planning format.
Wow.
And I had learned about this, I guess this is called the Dutch door. you mentioned it in yours too, but I didn't know that was that was called. I just saw somebody else do it, and I knew that I wanted more room for certain days. So I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday starts on the other side. And one thing to note about this page too, because it's going to change in a little bit, was that I had broken down my weekends in this column, and I realized later that like I didn't necessarily need all the hours of the day in the weekends because I wasn't like working. I was just doing random stuff on weekends, not really time stamped stuff. So this ended up being like a lot of the time it was blank or I didn't need it all. So I did that same format for a while. And then when I got to April, I changed my monthly spread because I knew that I wanted 2 lines per day instead of 1, because I generally had more than one big thing. So I made it 2 pages instead of 1, but it's essentially the exact same layout as that March one.
What are the two boxes next to each line?
So one of them is for sports. So I knew I had hockey at 8, softball at 7, that kind of stuff. I had it in the March one too. Where is it? Yeah. But I actually had symbols on it at that point. And then the other one is an injection I have to take. So I only have to take it every few days, and I'm really bad at tracking it. So I obviously I didn't even use it this month. That's how bad I am at tracking it. But I had good intentions. And then same thing, I did the CrossFit and the habit tracker. And then I did the same layout here. So I had realized I really did like this layout. But if you notice, like there'll be really like a lot of blanks on weekends. And then also like some days where there isn't that much, there's a lot of blank spaces. And I started to realize I was kind of wasting space. Like here's just some random things I threw in one day when I wanted to letter. And so then I started to kind of change this up where I'd put the whole weekend in one spot, and I would put a to-do list for the week in the bottom corner, just for like miscellaneous things I wanted to add and do as I worked through the week. And same thing with this one. I like made this week even shorter because I wasn't going to work Thursday, Friday. And so I just used that. And then I had that whole spread for other random to-do lists. In May, I did the same monthly one with 2 days per, or 2 lines per day. I had random client jobs that I needed to keep track of. I obviously fell off my habit tracker at about this point. And generally keeping the same kind of layout, adding a couple different like minor tweaks. June was the same layout, and random notes. July, same thing. I think I'm going to keep this monthly. I like that view. And then one week I just knew, well, first of all, I think I got really busy at in this whatever week this was. And so I didn't have time to actually make this spread for myself. So I just did 1 week where I wasn't looking at it by hour. I was just looking at it by to-do lists for each day. Wasn't super, like I didn't love it that much, but it was still helpful for me to see those to-do lists. And I left this page blank. I just filled up these florals like last week.
So it looks like you use the layout mainly for time, and then a couple to-do lists on the bottom, whereas mine is like flipped.
Yeah, so I tried to do it that way at the beginning in this one. And I just, like you were saying in your lesson, the way that your brain works with time, like my brain has to see it in these hours. Like I have to. Mm-hmm. And so I just realized that I liked that layout. But that being said, as we get like September, I've failed at even making, and August I didn't do any weekly spreads because I just ran out of time, didn't have time to make them. And so I still used this as my main like outline of the month, but I didn't make any. Then I flipped right to September. And now I'm doing more of this style where I'm not actually filling up the pages with the hours of the day, but I'm putting my to-do list in order. Like this would happen in the morning, afternoon, evening kind of thing. And so I'm not using as much room on the page. It's not taking me as long to lay it out, but I still have like the lists of everything I need to do. And so now into October. This is this week. I have my recording with you at this very moment, and things are in order of like how they would go in the day, but it's more of a to-do list. It's just in order, if that makes sense. So I've totally adapted it based on what works for me. And like you said, just constantly having it change is like totally fine with bullet journaling. And also, I don't even necessarily call this a bullet journal. I don't know if I even can call it a bullet journal since I don't do the process of like adding the symbols and migrating things and whatever, but it's my adaptation of it. So I think it's encouraging for people to see that you can change it totally based on whatever you want in yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And even some of the stuff like there's, you just make lists, and it's when you have time, you can always go back and retouch and revisit. And I think that's really cool too. You don't have to do it all in one.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, if someone is watching this, has never done bullet journaling before, and has decided now after this that they want to give it a try, what would be your top 3 things to do right away?
Ooh, I think top 3 things, I would say first, like I said earlier, take stock of what it is you actually want to track and keep in mind, because it gets really easy to get swept up in all the other stuff. So you need something to go back to. That's just personal to you. I think for some people, get a notebook that is either easy to ruin and you're not holding on to like any sentimental or financial value. Some people that really works, and then other people, they won't use it unless it's really nice. So figure out what kind of person you are there, just so that you immediately can get started. And if you need to shortcut that and get a piece of paper and just start doing it, whatever will save you from yourself in terms of overthinking and perfection and stuff like that, because that's going to be my main thing, is to plan on having a lot of little failures, and know that that's part of the process, and that now after 4.5 years, I still don't have a perfect system. So just trying to get started is the fastest way you're going to get to a system that does work for you.
I'll jump in and say that I think my number 1 tip would be to read Ryder Carroll's book before jumping into Pinterest, before looking at, bullet journaling on Instagram, because I just think that it's a lot less overwhelming that way.
Yeah, that's true. He really breaks it down and shows you all the different ways that you can use it and what you can adjust it for. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful, and that's where people should start for sure. And then once you're ready to go down the rabbit hole of seeing how people decorate them, then you can look up like #bullet journal, #monthly spread, #weekly spread, all of those things. And you can kind of just see what catches your eye and gives you inspiration, right?
Yeah.
So where can people find you and your blog and your Instagram and all of that stuff?
So I am at Pretty Prints and Paper, all on Instagram and blogging and YouTube as well. So I do cover a lot of the different ways I use the bullet journal, and a little bit of calligraphy, not as good as yours, but it's there to be found if you think it would be helpful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Jess. This was awesome. It was great to finally meet you. We were saying before we got on this call that we've been Instagram friends forever, but never actually like put a face to the name. So it's great to finally do that. And hopefully we'll have you back on again someday when maybe my students have gone through their draft bullet journal and are ready to get a little bit more intense with it.
I would love that. That'd be so awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again, and I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.